An uneasy silence fell. Everyone who was with Uhtred was staring at Osrith and Conall, and so it was that the sky began to cloud over. A rumble of thunder came from the west. Behind them, Osrith noticed, the 4 Gales that Ragnall had tasked with guarding her had followed their king and were standing behind them. A cry went up, a low yell, and a storm of blades and axes began to fight anew. It could only be Constantine's Mormers. But who was fighting with them? It wouldn't be long until everyone would begin to fight again. Osrith reasoned. Battles were like that, skirmishes would break out, and then huge battles would recommence so that everyone was fighting at once. Mormers. Osrith shouted over the noise in Gaelish. Do your worst. But there was no movement from any men close to Sigtryggr. Indeed, one man did step forward, taking Sigtryggr by the arm and leading him out into the center of the group. Men, Uhtred proclaimed. Norse, Northumbrians, Christians. This is your true king. He claims the land his forebears won, and he will tolerate all faiths in Eoferwick. He had sworn to peace with Mercia and Wessex, and promises that lives can be lived in Northumbria. People can live in peace and prosperity. Uhtred held Sigtrygg's arm again, leading him round the makeshift arena of men, paused in their fighting to listen to Uhtred. All hail King Sigtryggr, Uhtred added, holding his son-in-law's hand high into the air. All hail King Sigtryggr, came the reply. And besides Chiora, Osrith glimpsed the unmistakable form of Aethelstan. The battle is over. Sigtryggr began, beginning his first speech as newly acclaimed King of Northumbria. And I say to all of you now, it is not over. From beside Osrith, 9 Fingers screamed a reply. Ragnall, where are you? Men of the Norse, Gales. We fight on. And he was just about to pull Osrith towards him, when a reply came. Conall, it is not over. The voice came out of the cloud-gloomed landscape. It is not over, brother. It was Finan. It took a long time for Osrith to relate Finan to Conall, how much that it felt like a dream to her. If he were the brother of the man who had tortured her, on the beach at Doia. The man who had exceeded the Ullaid throne. Then he was the one who had held her down while 9 Fingers had forced himself into her mouth. Had tied her to the sea rock. Had stood with his brother and watched the tide coming. No, Osrith screamed, as Conall pushed her aside. No. But Finan did not look at her as she backed into the Gaelish warriors to whom she had been speaking not 10 minutes before. Finan, married to Gormleth, she had borne her husband, the Ullaid prince, 2 sons. He had been the brother sold to slavery after running off with 9 Fingers' wife. Brathair Beag, Conall murmured. You live, too. His words were matter of fact. Cold. What, are the peasants at Warner going to spring out of the ground as well? They fought, as the Gaelish warriors stood beside Osrith, keeping her from running, keeping her close at hand. And she continued to watch as Finan's anger, greater ever than Osrith's could be, bettered his brother, and killed him, in front of his men, in front of Ragnall Levason, his sworn general, stabbed in the chest with his own sword. It was only then that Finan stared at Conall, before lifting Fedasword and trod the blood-soaked earth to Osrith. Yours, he said to her, nodding his head, his eyes on her face as hers were on his before thrusting the blade into the soil in front of Osrith's feet. Then he turned, and crossed back to where Uhtred was standing, beside the new king of Northumbria, without even a second glance to the corpse that was once his own brother. But all that was superseded because, over the ground, under the sword of the figure that looked to be Eswi, with the Mormers close beside him, was Ragnall, the brother of the new king of Eoferwick. Struggled, but not for long. Sigtryggr offered for his brother to join him. Ragnall refused. And Sigtryggr refused Uhtred's offer to execute Ragnall Levason, choosing instead to be the one to run him through. But he could not go through with it. Instead, Sigtryggr watched his brother flee Eoferwick. Not a good day for brothers, mused Combe, not fully realizing the gravity of his statement. Osrith! Came a cry from across the battlefield, and Miral raced towards her, her mercenaries close behind him. You came, Osrith told him. You, and Eswi. We had men waiting, they did themselves, and Cumbraland, and Strathclyde proud. Owain led them, and, Owain? Osrith asked, in wonder, forgetting her hunger, her thirst, her tiredness, her instinct as a warrior in the foreground, wanting to hear the battle tales. Then, her face fell. "We will find him, Osrith," Muriel told her. "Elfrith will not go unburied." And then he glanced over her shoulder at the four Gales who were standing close to Osrith. They had me as hostage, Ragnall, King Connell, and she found it easier, much easier, to say his name with his body slumped on the battlefield not far away. "An alliance with Anleth," she added, in Gaelish, knowing that while Angus and Felim, who had joined Eswy and Muriel, would understand, so would the four Gales behind her. "What will you do now?" Osrith asked. "Return to Don Shada, ask to be his guard again?" "We could," mused Celduin, reaching past Somoth and picking up Bué. "What will you do with two swords?" "Fight twice as hard," Osrith told him, taking her sword that she had won at Dara. However, before she could continue, a shuffling sound was coming from the west. As she looked, Osrith saw that she was looking at men on horseback, and she followed the group until it became clear that it was Ethelfled. The Lady of the Mersons approached Sigtryggr and Utad, who were now organizing the cleanup of the battlefield, for metalwork to be collected, for graves to be dug, and was greeted by her title. She got down from her horse and surveyed the battlefield. "Good that she turns up when it's all over," Osrith said, in Gaelish, and the allied Gales laughed. "She will likely give you land," she added, in English, and she asked Muriel, and strode up to her. Ethelfled, with characteristic disdain, looked down on the weak and exhausted Osrith carrying both her swords. "I hear you fought well," she told Osrith, who deliberately kept her eyes fixed on the woman, and not her brother, nor his men, nor Ethelstan, who was standing next to his aunt's horse, her boots indenting the blood-soaked earth. "How many months of your debt have you repaid now, Osrith of Alba?" "4," Osrith told her. If she was expecting thanks, she did not get it. Instead, Ethelfled dismounted, and looked about her. "And now I ride north with a proposal that is of mutual benefit," Osrith continued. "How dare you ignore me?" she raged internally. Ethelfled was still perusing the battlefield, when she turned her head back to Osrith and continued to look at her with disdain.